obsessed with this project and I cannot wait to tell you all about it. Hey friends, Kristy Glass here with a finished object for you. It is the Blooming Bomber Jacket by Katie Jones. This is a free pattern by Paintbox Yarns. They collaborated with Katie Jones. It is a crochet pattern and it is a wonderful stash buster. I first saw this jacket on Naomi Ragg. She was our resident yarn bomber at Stitch Up Brooklyn in June of 2019. She was wearing this jacket and I didn't really take notice of it at first. I wasn't like, oh my goodness, what are you wearing? Because everything was just very overstimulating and everything's going on. And it wasn't until the next day when I saw it sort of, I think it was just laying down in a hotel room and I decided to try it on and I thought, this is such an amazing piece. I am obsessed with it. So I downloaded the pattern. It's a Frida-inspired collection by Katie Jones in collaboration with Paintbox Yarns. And I sat there for a long time studying the jacket and I thought about pulling the trigger on purchasing the yarn from Paintbox. All of their yarn, it seems, is acrylic, and I wasn't sure I wanted to make it in acrylic. I was sort of hoping to hold out for some of my natural wools, and I thought, you know, I have so much wool. There may be enough in my stash that I could pull this together. So I went stash diving, and I was so pleased to remember this yarn that I had. I was a little bit concerned about finding the black yarn in my stash, and then I remembered my friend Jonathan, who is a designer. He offloaded, is that the right word? He gave me a lot of yarn, and what I didn't know before, because I'm just a hand knitter who goes to a yarn shop and gets a skein of yarn, is that yarn comes in these huge cones. Especially if you're a designer, you have tons of yarn because you're knitting samples, you're trying your patterns out in different fibers, etc. So he gave me tons of yarn on cones, a lot of which I ended up gifting to people who needed yarn, but I kept a good amount of it and most of it is the color black. So look at this giant, this cone is heavy. This is many pounds. This is so heavy. I don't even know what fiber it is. Usually inside the cone there's a label that tells you what it is. All I have here is what looks like maybe Italian and French. The word Cauliiez. I don't know what that means. And then it says Bora Bora, there's a number, and it says Noir, which I believe means black. So I don't even know what fiber this is, and people tell me that there's a way to at least tell if it's a natural fiber by burning it. To the touch, if my life depended on it, I would say this is cotton. So because it's crochet, I thought, well, you know, that's good. A little cotton is good, but it wasn't the right weight. Well, I didn't do the wraps per inch because I didn't learn about really how to work the wraps per inch until after I had gotten started on this. So I took this giant cone and I made myself little tiny balls of yarn so that I had a couple of different, I couldn't carry this around with me, so I just made a couple of balls of yarn out of my black, and then I thought, you know, I would really like this jacket to be as sparkly and crazy as possible, and you really can't tell in the video. I'll do some close-ups, but you cannot tell that there is a lot of sparkle happening in this Blooming Bomber jacket. With the black, I combined it with this cone, which again, this cone actually is completely bent inside there, so even if there's a label, I don't know what it says. But this fiber is definitely some sort of wool or wool, it might be acrylic, it might be some sort of wool, faux wool, but if you can see, there's like this orange sparkle hue to it. I'm trying to show you. It's probably really hard to see on the camera, but if you look at it, it looks like an orange sparkle base with a fluffy black outer thin sort of coating. So that's what this fiber is. So these two held together made a really wonderful black base for this project. Here it is together. So this is where I started, these two. I did end up carrying this cone around to hold double. It's much lighter, it's much less cumbersome. So that became the base for the black. Now, if you follow the formula for the pattern, it will tell you exactly the colors that were used. So if you want to imitate it exactly, you can follow that. The problem with that for me is that I was dependent on my scraps. So for example, I had a lot of green. I actually had several different greens. So I had huge balls of green, but I had really tiny small balls of this yellow in the cuff. So you have to manage your yarn based on how much you have. So just a tip, and because it's a free pattern, I feel okay talking about this. This is crocheted in a hexagon. So it has 6 sides. I'm not sure if you can tell from looking, this is where it starts. The pattern starts here in the armpits. And I was a little thrown by the pattern. There were a few times in the pattern where I was a little confused at what was happening. And the beginning was one of those times where I thought it was just five sections, but it was 6, I think. Wait. Yes, but it was 6. So I had to look at the hashtag on Instagram to get some help knowing exactly what I was crocheting. So once I used the hashtag blooming bomber jacket and could see the beginnings of the construction, it clicked and I understood what was happening. So it starts in these armpits, and I crocheted mine 2 at a time, meaning I would do one section of this, one section of that, because when there's 2 identicals of something, I get stressed out, especially when I'm managing the yarn and the colors. So if you are gonna buy yarn for this project, just know that this stripe here, this green stripe, is rather prominent, and this is going to be probably your biggest stripe of the whole project. So whatever you have the most of, it's gonna be this stripe. If you have something really special that you only have a little bit of that you would have to use at the beginning when the hexagon is much smaller, just know that's gonna be in your armpit. It probably won't even show. So maybe yarn you don't love as much, put in the armpit, and save the really special small quantities for this cuff right here or this pocket right here, because those 2 details, I feel, really pull it together and add to the pizzazz. Oh my gosh, I just said pizzazz. They add to the artistic value of the piece. Keep in mind that you can mix yarns together. One of the favorite yarns that I had for this piece is this metallic red, and this was a yarn that I purchased on Etsy years ago. I wanted some sparkly cashmere. When I feel this, I don't think it feels like cashmere. So I don't know if I was just cheated. You know, it wasn't super expensive, but this held together, held double, ended up being some of my favorite yarn in the whole piece. So I have that in my cuff right here. I have it right here in the edging, and I have it in the flower. So I really love this red. The sparkle really reads really well, and it really pops. I also really enjoyed combining the different yarns that I had in my stash that I just had like one of. So for example, this is some silver spun from the Feel Good Yarn Company. This is yarn that is spun with real silver. And because I love this jacket, I wanted some of the healing properties of the silver to be incorporated into it. It just felt right. So I held that double with this sequins skein of purple, and it has a really nice impact when you see the purple stripe. The purple stripes right here. It has some fun impact with the sequins. I also wanted to use some very natural wool, and this was one of the colors in the original, and I probably would not have picked this out, but I do like how it plays in the piece. There's some of it right here, and there's also some in the flower pocket. It's kind of deep in there. It's a little bit hard to see. When I was doing the pocket, speaking of the pocket, I found that the pattern was telling me to use a color yarn that did not match with the picture. And I wasn't totally watching for that while I was crocheting up the body, but I was really concentrating on getting this pocket right, and it helped to look at the picture when I felt confused about the stitch. And I noticed that whatever color was matching to the color code in the pattern wasn't the same as the picture. So I just want you to refer to the picture if you want to get the exact same flower that was pictured there. Don't use the code, just use your eyes. Because I tried to match mine almost exactly to the picture. So that's a tip. I also used some of my own hand-dyed yarn from Norway. This I dyed in Oslo. And so that was nice to have this because it's just one single skein. I like knowing that that stripe is in this bomber jacket. And I also just played around with combining mohair with a few of the stripes, and and other yellows. So I had a really bright yellow that I have no remnants of, but I combined it with a lighter yellow just to play around with textures and colors. And towards the end, I added some of my sequins. This is another cone that my friend Jonathan gave me. It's just a cone of black sequins. You can definitely see that showing up in the camera. So this sequins I incorporated towards the end. So on the edging here, on the edging on my pocket, because I just love sequins and sparkles. It is the best. I also had some of my friends, Alyssa, she hand dyed this silk for me, so I combined this in there with, held together with some more of this sequins. I don't even know why I have all of this in my stash, but that's, I can't remember the projects I used them for, but that's why you hold on to things, you know? Don't be afraid of using a little bit of variegated yarn, so I used this pink quite a bit in the whole jacket. I actually used it a lot, and it was really just so much fun. Now the pattern calls for adding a button to hold up the pocket. I haven't added a button because I don't know that I'll fill my pockets, and they seem to be holding their shape very well for now. So if I need to, I can always add a button later. I picked a few out and put them into the project bag, so they're there. But I just wanted to show you this because not only was it so much fun, I enjoyed the construction so much. It was so inspiring. I had just recently been to the Frida Kahlo exhibit in Brooklyn. I found her just sense of fashion and her play and how she put outfits together and jewelry and all the photographs taken of her and just her styling and the flowers in her hair and the braids and everything so inspiring. So I loved that this was also inspired by her. At least that's, it doesn't say that in the pattern, but for some reason that's the impression I got. I guess in maybe some research I was doing on Instagram. Maybe I'm totally making that up, but there was another top that I downloaded as well. This is called the Kahlo crop top. That's where I'm getting this from. So this was the same collection that Katie Jones did. So this is the Kahlo crop top, and then the blooming bomber jacket is in the same collection. So that's where I got that from. And it inspired me to sew. So I sewed a skirt. It isn't quite completely finished yet, and there are some mistakes, but I was just so inspired that I looked up some more photos of Frida and some of her skirts, and I had this beautiful fabric that I'd gotten in Mexico when I was there about 3 years ago that it's just been sitting on my shelf. And so I put together a little exposed waistband. This has a nice woven pattern in it, exposed elastic, with this beautiful skirt. And then she always had this like horizontal detail. So this has fabric from also Mexico, and then I added some burlap in between in hopes to maybe do some embroidery or cross stitch on it. I don't know, it's not completely done yet, but it was just overall a very inspiring project. It even got me into thinking about making some jewelry. So just the night that I finished this in the morning, I made the skirt in the afternoon, and then that night I found myself making these tassels, again with some Mexican yarn that is acrylic. I got it from the Neon Tea Party. So Marissa, she has an amazing craft company, Neon Tea Party. I'll put a link for it underneath here. She sent me this tassel kit of her acrylic, Mexican acrylic that she sources here in, she sources it in Mexico and she distributes it here in the States. I used a loom. I've talked about the loom on my channel here before. And then I found these pom-poms in my stash. So I thought about putting together a little off-the-wall jewelry to sort of go with my whole Frida look. So I'm not sure where I will incorporate these tassels, but she's just kind of like about more is more. And I just love the idea of combining all of these patterns and textures together, and oh, there go the tassels. Anyway, I just had the best time making the blooming bomber jacket. Highly recommend it to all of you crocheters out there. I don't know if it's a beginning pattern. I mean, you'll learn some things. It's very basic here. These stitches are very basic. They get a little more complicated. There was actually a section on the bottom that I didn't quite understand with some bobbles, so I just skipped it. Who cares? It's done. It's finished. It's finished. It's fiend. Thank you so much for checking in to Kristy Glass Knits and Crochets. I was so thrilled to show you this project, and I really cannot wait to see what you choose to make with your blooming bomber jacket pattern. See you next time. Bye. Oh my gosh, I just said possess.